Hello, welcome to the MuseScore Café for today, Wednesday, April 9th, 2020. And my name is Marc Sabatella, the Director of Education for MuseScore. This is my weekly series of chats where we talk about some different aspect of MuseScore and music making. So, I keep saying, and have been saying for like the last month or more, that we thought MuseScore 3.5 was imminent, and I think we're actually releasing this beta, I'm sorry, alpha version today, but I can't guarantee exactly when it will show up. But I can tell you it's essentially done, so we're going to talk about it, is my plan. As soon as I verify that I'm actually broadcasting, because, by gosh, I don't see any evidence of it yet. It says I'm streaming. Are you guys seeing anything? Alright, so yes, I am. Okay, good. Well, my phone doesn't see it, but I will just go on faith, and at least I see the chat. Oh, it's live now. Okay, well there it is. Okay, so okay, okay, cool. All right, so we have been. This is going to be an unusual release. So, also for people who are tuning in maybe for the first time, I pick a topic, I talk about that topic. But if you have other burning questions, I'm always happy to answer other questions. Might wait till there's a good opportunity to work that in. I also want to follow up a little bit on. Last week's cafe. You remember last week we talked about this. We talked about the Pachelbel canon, and then the Corona canon that I'm going to assemble. So I have, as of right now, I believe 23 submissions. Officially, I stopped taking them last night at midnight, but I didn't actually turn off the thing. If some of you are sitting there saying, "Oh, I forgot to send mine in," I'm not going to turn it off until the end of this cafe. So when I stop talking today, then I will turn it off. So maybe there'll be 24 or 25 by then. But then I will, over the next week, start assembling, and maybe next week I can do the follow up and actually talk about we'll show off what we all came up with. So thanks to everyone who submitted, and if you have something that you just haven't quite hit the send button on yet, go ahead and do it right now. Okay, so I'm going to be talking mostly about MuseScore 3.5, which as I mentioned, we haven't. Well, first of all, I know we haven't released 3.5 yet, but we're going to have an alpha version, which is like a test version, meaning we've implemented everything we intend to implement. As far as we know, it basically works, but we definitely want help testing it because quite a lot of things were done. Not like huge, obvious changes, but tons of bug fixes, just tons of them, but also just small, mostly small, a couple fairly, one or two like not so small improvements, like new features to show you. So I'm just going to kind of give you a walk through the process because it is not actually available yet to install. I think that's going to happen later today. I want to actually walk you through the process of installing a nightly build, which is something that probably many of you have not done before. So I need to open a new window here, and I don't care about that. I'll get to see my notifications and things. I want to go to I'll go here. And what I'm going to do, can I do that? Sure, why not? I don't care. I do Zoom stuff. I want to paste into the chat where you can download nightly builds from. So there it is. And I'm going to pin that puppy now that that's a thing. Pin message. All right. So this is the place where you download nightly builds from. So what a nightly build is, every time, so MuseScore being open source, people from all around the world are contributing to its development. And anytime someone makes a proposed change, they test it on their own machines and make sure they think it's good. But there's sort of a centralized system for deciding what's actually merged into the main MuseScore product that eventually will be released. And every time one of these changes gets merged, it doesn't immediately show up like on everyone's system around the country, around the world, but it does show up in a nightly build. And so you can always get the latest and greatest version of MuseScore that's, has features that aren't actually released yet, through this link that I just posted here. So this is when the changes that have been approved that are going to be in the next release. They just haven't been released yet. So you'll see there's builds for different operating systems here. And since I'm on my Windows machine, I'm going to go to Windows. And it used to be that the first one you had to ignore because it was some weird thing, but we've apparently fixed that, which I'm very happy about because that was annoying. So it's going to be the first bold-faced one that's going to be the most recent one. We call them nightly, but as you can see, every time a change gets merged, a new nightly build is made. So there, some days nothing is merged and there's no nightly builds. But just today, we've merged another, whatever this is, 10 more bug fixes / new features. A couple of them are new features actually. So I'm going to grab the most recent one here, and it downloads as a 7Z file. It's a special kind of zip file, and I think you might have to have the 7-zip program. Yeah, you have to have the 7-zip program here to download and install it. It's a special kind of zip type file. But once it downloads and installs, did I actually download that thing? Now I lost my train of thought. I feel like I did, but I don't see the little notification that tells me you're down. Oh, that's because it's on this machine. It shows up over here. I also forget because I flip back and forth between machines. 13 minutes. No, I can't wait 13 minutes. If that's the case, I'll just show you with whatever the most recent build is that I have. But no, usually this doesn't take 13 minutes. It's usually more like a minute. So this would be very unfortunate if, because what the? No, you can't take an hour. Yeah, now it's going back. No, now it's going down like crazy. Okay, so, yeah, it was just a temporary glitch, I think. But it does look like it is actually going to take a few minutes, which is quite annoying. So I guess I need a plan B. Well, plan B is while this downloads, normally it's so fast, but I wanted to wait because more and more changes keep getting merged, and there were 2 new features just merged this morning that I wanted to be able to show you. So that's why I don't have that ready. But let's go ahead and jump over to log in, really. I guess I just rebooted my machine and I have to re-log in. There we go. I'm going to come over to MuseScore.com where all the things are for the Corona thing, and we're just going to do a quick little check so you can all see what things look like. Oh, there's someone who just added 25 minutes ago, so that's, hope this doesn't suck. I bet it doesn't. Corona Canon project here. So, 23 submissions. Let's take a look. These are the things that have been submitted, and is good, and BSG Bernard. Bernard, I believe so. This is a really wonderful composer, theorist person who I was really glad chose to participate in this project here. Ooh, and it looks like that slowness is maybe internet at my end because, boy, these thumbnails are taking forever also. So something, hopefully I'm not too hiccupy in my thing. Ah. Okay. So here's his submission here, and we can just listen to it on MuseScore.com. We can if I make sure my volume's up. So I rebooted my machine right before. So he chose to get fancy and use multiple voices here. So that is Bernard's. Boy, I sure hope I'm remembering the name correctly. As I said, he was very inspirational to me, and when I was building my music theory course, Bernard Greenberg, yes, um, uh, that he has all of this really great counterpoint, like a whole textbook basically that he's created within MuseScore. Uh, that's just like chock full of text and examples and stuff, and he did it all within MuseScore, and that kind of inspired me to make all the handouts and worksheets and stuff for my online course also, all within MuseScore, so that you can hear, it's a theory text, but now we can actually hear the playback and understand, what he's writing is there. So it's really great work that he has produced. Okay, let's see if my download. Ooh, almost. I am so sorry about that. It's not usually anywhere near that slow, but I'm gonna bring up just the regular MuseScore to show you. So this is MuseScore 3.4.2, the current version that I'm about to start up here. Just in case it becomes relevant to ever do any comparing between the two. And one of the first things, once this nightly build finishes downloading, one of the first things I want to show you is one of the new features that was just merged this morning. And to understand that, it will help to compare. So yeah, between me broadcasting currently and that download, my system is crazy slow. Easiest way to do this is just go to continuous view, and I'm just going to enter some notes, which I am not hearing playback because I have constantly been messing with my playback settings. And I will do this. All right. So this is what you are accustomed to seeing when you do the playback within MuseScore. People who are using MuseScore as kind of a practice tool, a play-along tool, have often requested a different behavior. Go away. Oh, so close, so close. Where they've requested that you would be able to have the cursor, instead of having the cursor move while the score sheet stays still, they said it would be better, that it would be easier to be reading along if the page actually scrolled and the cursor stayed in one place, so you keep your eyes focused on one place. Because the problem with the moving cursor is once it reaches the edge of the screen, then the whole screen shifts, and it's, if you're trying to play along, you will often lose your place. So for people who are trying to use MuseScore as a kind of a practice tool, something to play along with, that has long been a requested enhancement. Oh, good. Now it's just finalizing. Yes, finally open the thing. All right, so once it is downloaded, then you'll see that the zip file, I've opened the zip file, and it contains a folder. I'm going to extract that folder into my you can put it anywhere you want, but I just put it in my downloads folder. And since I've done this many times before, there's already one there, and I'm just going to overwrite everything that's there with the new stuff. So then to run the nightly build, all I have to do is go to my downloads folder, and there's that MuseScore nightly folder that I just created. And you'll see that there is a nightly.bat batch file. If you're not using Windows, it'll be some different thing, but it'll be something you can just run. Actually, I think everything about it looks different on Mac and certainly on Linux, but you'll see instructions for how to do those systems. So when MuseScore fires up, a couple things are going to be different that we'll see. Okay. I'm going to now, I have to wait for it to finish Also loading, and because I don't see the start center yet, so I know it's not done yet. Okay, there we go. If I go to continuous view now, and I start entering some notes, and I press play, I think by default it's still going to do the same thing. But let's go to Edit, Preferences, and I thought it was supposed to be a whole tab here. All right, I might have to. So since this is brand new, this is probably not the. I mean, brand new, like just a few hours ago. By the way, this is one thing here. There's now a new option to control whether MuseScore generates backup files. Usually it generates a backup file every time you save a score, and it starts with a period and ends with a comma, and those are normally invisible, but if you've set up your computer to show invisible files, those can be annoying to look at. So now there's an option to control uh, whether or not we actually generate backups. And I think there's also a way to control where they get placed, although I can't swear to that. So I don't actually see I thought there was supposed to be a whole new tab here with controls having to do with that continuous thing. So apparently I'm smooth pan. Okay, here we go. It's now just in here. So there's options here that I guess I need to learn how to use, but I'm going to turn on that enabled, smooth pan enabled. I guess that's what I need. And let's see if that does the trick. No. All right, so I'm gonna have to learn how to use that feature. I think there's just more stuff I need to enable in order to get that thing. Look at all these things here. There's all these settings here, any one of which could be the thing. So I am going to have to learn to use that feature, and since it was only merged this morning, I haven't. But I was, look at that. Now it's different color. Oh, look at now. Okay. So it's so I don't know why there's the two cursors, but that's the other thing I enabled. But it's, I guess, only once it reaches the middle of the screen does it start the smooth scroll. So there you go. That's the smooth scrolling in going for you there. So as far as the that is the newest of the newest features. So I was excited to see it. As far as other new features, I want to show you. Let's go with. I'm going to open my Beethoven sonata score that you may have seen. Let me make sure I didn't see any other comments. Okay, so I'm gonna show you the biggest, to me, the biggest of the features, because I'm a jazz person, of course. And then I'm going to run down the list, and you all can tell me what you're most curious about, and I can demonstrate other things. But if I come here, Pathétique to lead sheet, here we go. This is my lead sheet for the Beethoven Sonata Pathétique that I had made, in which I kind of reharmonize things some. And if I go to Edit, Preferences, because a lot of the new features are not enabled by default because people are maybe used to how things work. And if you're not used to hearing chord symbols, it's going to be very distracting to hear them. So you see it's play chord symbols is here under Preferences, Edit Preferences, Note Input is where it's going to be. So if I just play this score now, you just hear the melody. But if I go back to Edit, Preferences, Note Input, and now play chord symbols. You'll see there's also a checkbox to control if it plays them while you're editing them. In other words, while you're typing the chord symbol. As soon as you finish typing it, it'll play the chord symbol if you have that option checked. So I'm now playing chord symbols, and now let's hear the score. Oh, come on. I know the feature works, but I think I do also know that it's connected to the mixer, and now there's a new chord symbol channel here. And maybe, boy, I sure don't like it when things don't work in my demos, and I don't know why, because then I look like I don't know what I'm doing, which I always, I don't always know what I'm doing, but I certainly expected this to work. Let's see. Well, now you got to hear the chord. All right, fine. So there you go. Playback of chord symbols, one of the most requested features over the years, is now a reality. And there's quite a few controls over this that are in here, where if I select a chord and then come over here to the inspector, you'll see all these interpretation settings and voicing settings and things that you can play around with. The interesting one to me is to set the jazz setting, because now things like when I play the F7, it will, I need to make that one be jazz. And then I can make that be the style setting. So all of them, now it's setting it as a style so that all the chords will have jazz settings. So can you hear? Maybe you can, maybe you can't, but it's got a flat 9 on it because that's what a jazz person would do. So it's not always the case that the choices made by the algorithm are perfect relative to the note. So for that one, I didn't like how it decided, because I think what it chose to do is put an A natural in the voicing, which is a fine thing to do for G diminished chords in general, not so much when there's a B flat in the melody. So for that chord, I might set it back to being literal, because this chord is complex enough. It didn't need the extra jazziness. So anyhow, chord symbol playback is now a thing. You just enter your chords, but you go into that preference, you enable the thing. I think, I'm not sure, some sort of bug could have to do with the fact that I was using this score with an older build, and that could have something to do with why it didn't work at first. I don't know. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of rattle off a list of like about 10 other sort of interesting new things, and then kind of try to cover them as, I don't know, as quickly, but not thoroughly, like I'm going to really teach you everything about using them, but just to really show off what they are like. So in addition to that one, so that one was implemented by Peter Vu, a Google Summer of Code student from last year. Google, as you may know, sponsors people to work on open source software every summer, and so most summers we've been fortunate enough to have like 2 or 3 or 4 students working on MuseScore that are basically paid by Google to do this. And so Peter Vu implemented that with me mentoring him. There was another Google Summer of Code project from last year that was just merged as part of 3.5. And for that one, I'm going to come back to my little simple score here, and I'm going to just make a little change here. What if you want to change to clarinet here? Say you wanted to start off your score with someone playing the piano, and then they put down their piano and pick up a clarinet. That's not normally something you do, but I could do it. Colleen, I know you can do that too. Maybe not in one measure, but that's okay. So normally it would be something like in a jazz setting, maybe the saxophone player would switch to clarinet or flute, or in a orchestral setting, a trumpet player might switch from a C trumpet to a B flat trumpet, or an oboe player might switch to English horn. So we've always, well, I shouldn't say always, but for several years we've supported that, but the process was not all that simple. So in the past, if you wanted to do that, this is now this is the current version, 3.4.2. If I go to the text palette here and add a change instrument element, it adds, and then you're like, okay, now what? I don't know. The answer was, well, you would have to right click it and say change instrument, and then you could select your clarinet. And you see that it changed the pitches here because clarinet is a transposing instrument. When I press play, you hear that it changes the playback sound. But it just still says change instrument. So I have to go in here and change the text to say to clarinet. And notice it didn't put in a new key signature or anything there. I would have to do that manually. Well, this is now what is simplified. If I want to add a change instrument now in 3.5, I have my first note selected here, and as soon as I press the change instrument, it asks me, well, what instrument you want to change to? I didn't have to right click it or anything, so I can pick my B flat clarinet. And when I do that, it not only changes the notes, but it adds the key signature and adds the text. Now I can still change this if I like. I don't really need to say B flat clarinet. We know that. I can edit that text myself. But it just automates the whole process. And if I delete this text, it should undo all of that if it works correctly. There you go. Okay. All right. I'll see you later, Colleen. All right. So change the note heads of the drum accents. So there is a related thing. So there is a sense in which this is related, Gabriel. So I'm going to come to your question a little bit later. Actually, there's no reason I can't just deal with that right now, because those were kind of the two. This doesn't look like a big feature, but it required a lot of changes under the hood. So that's one reason why it didn't get merged until now, even though the code was written last summer. Chord playback also was a lot of code. Most of the other features were smaller changes, but equally maybe significant. So one of them, and this is going to eventually relate to your thing, Gabriel. In MuseScore 3. I'm not going to keep switching if I don't need to. I'll just show you how it used to be possible to put. You could right-click a staff, say Staff Part Properties, Advanced Style Properties, and then you could go in and change the note head scheme to be pitch names, or these different shape note things. So if I go to pitch names setting, you can see in the preview here, it puts the name of the pitch right there in the note. And so that was a way you could get note names within the notes. See the C, the D, the E, and the F. But it was an all or nothing thing, at least for that staff. Well, in 3.5, now you can do that just for selected notes. So if I really just want the first measure to be that way, I can just control click those notes or select that measure however I want. And now if I look here, head scheme in the inspector, I can change it to note names, and that's that. So this has to do with changing note heads. Now, Gabriel, your question is a bit more specific. It's about drums, but I'll go ahead and, since it's relating to this, I'm going to show, I don't think this process is changed at all. But on drums, normally when you enter notes, you're entering that. Oh, double click. You enter these notes, and each individual note has its own shape and everything. So normally the shape of the note tells you which drum. It doesn't tell you anything about it. But I do know there is like some subset of drummers who actually do like to change the note head to indicate things having to do with the sticking of it or the accents of it. And so if that is what you're asking, unfortunately, I don't think that it's directly possible to only change a note if you don't want to change its sound. But if you do want to change its sound, like you can see that these settings here are grayed out because they're not, you can't actually change them. You can change it to a half note note head. That's about the only thing you can change individually about individual notes. But what you can do is you can customize the drum set. So if I right click the staff, or actually if I go back to note input mode, you probably couldn't see what I was doing there because my face is covering that, right? Yeah, I might, for this particular thing, lose the headshot because I'll probably be demonstrating some other inspector related things. So if I click the edit drum set button here, oh, by the way, before I go any further, You may or may not have noticed a subtle difference in the font used here. That is a bug fix. Also, Windows changed from one font to another as their default font that gets used for dialog boxes and menus and so forth, but due to a number of things that aren't really important, we weren't doing that correctly. We were still using the old Windows font, at least some of the time. So now we're using the current Windows default font. You can still change the font used. You can go to Edit, Preferences, General, and then you can select a different font here as the default font. But now this one here is the actual current Windows default, and we get that right now. So it does mean that things look a little different. So I'm looking at this Edit Drum Set button and realizing, oh, it looks different. Okay, so if I click this button, I get this option where I can change a lot of things. So like if I want to change how that particular note, the closed hi-hat, looks, I can change that to be a different thing. But I can't change just one of them. But what I can do is say, well, if the whole idea of that is that you want a different sound there, then we can go back to that dialog, and this time I'm going to get there by right-clicking. You can go back to that dialog and just pick a sound like the side stick and just use that sound and have that be our, X with a circle. And I'm just going to call it accented hi-hat. And now I can just enter that note instead of the regular hi-hat. So when I come here, I will, oh shoot, I don't even remember where I put that thing. Oh, it's right here. Accented hi-hat. And I can enter that note, and then I get what I want for it. And I guess I didn't customize which line it appeared on. So edit drum set. I need to put it on staff line. I think that's 0. Nope, it's -1. There we go. Ooh, that's not the right note. It's the one that I put and called accented hi-hat. Here it is. Accented hi-hat. And I want that to be on staff line -1. I have to actually edit the note before it updates. So now I can have it look the way I want. It's going to play back as a side stick. So it doesn't actually play back as an accented thing. So if that bothers you, you can continue to work around by putting invisible notes elsewhere and playing around with that kind of stuff. But anyhow, the norm in drum notation, you don't do that. But there, as I said, there is definitely a set of like one particular publisher, I think, who does that, and so people who follow that standard are asking about this. So no doubt we will eventually support that more directly. Okay, so I talked about setting these note head schemes on a note-by-note basis for at least non-percussion staves. Some of the other things that are new that you can be looking forward to here in MuseScore 3.5. One of them has to do also with transposing instruments. So I'm going to change this whole staff to clarinet. I just change instrument, and we will change it to B-flat clarinet. All right, and notice it shows in the key of D now. I'm going to switch to concert pitch, so I'm seeing things at the written pitch. Well, what if my music was going to be actually in B? Let's actually transpose. I'm going to go to Tools, Transpose, and just actually transpose. It now says, it used to say by key, which really didn't make sense, because really what it's doing is it's selecting the new key. So we've just changed the wording of that to be more clear. So I want to transpose to the key of B major. Okay, great. The song is now in B major. I think I only transposed, I only had that part of it selected. You have to have nothing selected or everything selected if you want everything selected. So I'm going to do that again and transpose to B major. All right, it's in B major now. Well, that's concert pitch. What happens if I turn concert pitch off and we see it transposed? C sharp major. Now that's technically correct. That is the absolutely technically correct transposition. And I will say that many woodwind players, because woodwind players are used to seeing sharps, any number of woodwind players would say, yeah, that's good. I'm fine with C sharp major because I'd rather see a whole lot of sharps than a whole bunch of flats. But people who aren't just woodwind players, who are maybe also pianists or other instruments, we like seeing flats. I like seeing flats a lot. I personally would rather see 5 flats than 7 sharps. If I was a full-time clarinet player, I am not so sure I would agree with that. But in any case, I personally would prefer to see 5 flats over 7 sharps. There didn't used to be a way to do that, at least not a straightforward way. But if I go to staff part properties, I can now say, do I prefer sharps or flats? I prefer flats. And now I get that. Now the note, that's in the key signatures. I would still have to change the spelling of the notes, but that's very easy. I just select this and I press J, and that changes the spelling of the notes. All right, I see there's a couple, so Gabriel, ensemble stacks on a big band. Oh, you are talking about something different. So you are talking about accent notation. So, yeah, so I don't want to get too distracted from things, but I do, if you're not aware of it, I want to show you that there is this facility. Let's say that this is the thing I want accented. I enter these notes, I switch them into voice 3, and then I select that, and I come here and say toggle to make slash notation, and then I can also do a fill with slashes. This is like the typical combination you would do. So if I do fill with slashes, boom. So now I have slash notation for the drums, and I have these accents on top. Now, if you don't like that drum head, I think you might have to, because I can't remember how we choose that drum head to be. I know we make it be slashes above regular staff. I think to be above a regular staff, I think we make these heads be slash heads or X heads, and on drum staves we make them be regular note heads, because that seems to be the standard for these things. So you might have to just fake this. There's nothing about this accent notation that's magic. It's all just settings in the inspector. It's the fact that we've marked that chord, meaning the whole thing, not just the note head, but the stem and the beam and everything associated with it. We've marked it small. I've set the fixed to line property at -1 so that it won't transpose. Not that drums ever transpose, but that's important for other instruments. So anyhow, if you have further questions about this, I would recommend going to the forum so we can get into it in a little more detail. All right, so as far as other features that are, or other new things, so I just showed you that transposition feature, and I've showed you things about the instrument change. There's another one here where if I'm creating, say, an orchestra score, let me let me create a simple little score, and I'm going to say I want to choose instruments, and I'm going to make it be for flute, 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 and then maybe a clarinet. And I'm just going to finish this thing. So one of the new things is our flutes just got numbered for us automatically. Small little thing, but a nice little thing. Now, if you want to have all your flutes on separate staves, great. MuseScore has always supported that. But what if you really have 2 clarinets, but they were similar enough you really wanted to put them on one staff? We, for MuseScore 3, implemented a feature that would allow you to do that. You could add you could add these notes in voice 1, and then there we go. So now I have one part in voice 1, one part in voice 2, and then we've always had this feature that allowed you, not always, since MuseScore 3 came out a year and a half ago, we've had this feature that would allow you to generate separate parts for voice 1 versus voice 2. But we sort of didn't advertise it much because it unfortunately was pretty darn buggy. It's much less buggy now. Uh, there's still a couple issues that are being worked on, and hopefully by the time 3.5 comes out for real, they'll be there. But I want to show this to you because it's I think it's already going to be very useful. So if I come here into File Parts, and then I say I want a single part, and I want it to be made from the clarinet staff. Oh, I'm going to call it. I have to name it. I'm going to call it Clarinet 1, and I select the clarinet part staff and I hit the plus, but I tell it I only want voice 1, and I can uncheck those boxes. And now that part, clarinet 1, has the clarinet staff, but only voice 1. And now I can generate another part, call it clarinet 2, and this time spell clarinet correctly. And again, add the clarinet staff, but this time say I only want voice 2. All right, now when I press OK, I'm going to have two clarinet parts. There's clarinet 1, and that's just voice 1. And here's clarinet 2, and that's just voice 2. So this feature was implemented actually as part of a Summer of Code several years ago, and was released as part of MuseScore 3, but there were too many bugs to make it even close to useful. So it is now, I will say, already with MuseScore 3.5 close to useful, and there's a couple more bugs that hopefully be fixed before the actual release of 3.5. But it's enough to be useful now. I will say it will be to your advantage, as always, to not generate parts until you're pretty well close to being done with the score. So that's another one of the kind of new things. Howard, I just saw you join. I'm gonna show off your some of your tremolo stuff. So if I don't remember all of the various things that are improved about it, that's okay. You feel free to tell me something else to show, but I'm trying to just like quickly run through things. So it used to be the case if you tried adding a tremolo to a single, palette search. If I type trem, the tremolo, I'm using the palette search. This has been improved also, how keyboard navigation and search works. I don't really have time to get into the details of that, but I will say that if you are accustomed to keyboard navigation of dialog boxes and how things work as far as pressing particular shortcuts to move between sections, some of that works much more as expected. So it's kind of an accessibility improvement. Anyhow, so tremolo. If I now add a 3-stroke tremolo to that C, this is going to look good, right, Howard? Yes. Okay, I think formerly, if I had done that same thing in MuseScore in the current version, let's try it. Oh, that particular one wasn't so bad, right? So let's so there we go. There's C in the previous version, but now let's see what happens in the current version. Nice, Howard. All right. The other one that's I think a lot of people are going to be really happy with is this guy. I'm going to apply, not that one. I'm going to apply the tremolo between notes. So we get this thing. Okay. This is a style of indicating a tremolo between two notes. But especially like 18th, 19th century piano music in particular, publications, and yeah, it's still occasionally used a different notation style for this. So this is now supported. If I click this and then say stroke style, all strokes attached to stems, I get that, which is a thing, right? And so that's nice. And then you can also customize things, so you could change the note heads on it. You could do it with shorter note values and change the note heads themselves to be, you could enter that. You could do a thing where they were displaying as eighth notes, but then change the note heads to be eighth notes, to be half notes. So all sorts of things there. Fix in sight for editing parts after you've already created them. I'm not sure what you mean by that. I mean, in general, that works. In general, you can edit parts all you want after you've created them. The only thing I would say is that there are certain things that maybe work better if you wait until the last moment, to wait until later in the process. that maybe work a little more smoothly. Performance-wise, it's a little faster if you wait until you're basically done with the edits, because MuseScore has to work twice as hard to update all the parts on edits. We've made a lot of improvements over the years to make MuseScore uh, less dependent on the size of your score, and it can be fast. But in general, it should be fine to edit parts after you've created them. So if there's a particular issue that you have in mind, feel free to describe it more, and then I can let you know. Okay, so I'm going to run through some of the other things. Howard talked about the transposition thing with the prefer sharps and flats. One of the improvements also that I know very little about, because again, these are very new changes, but let me go ahead and on my clarinet staff, I'm going to add some eighth notes. I meant quarter notes. I don't know why I typed that. All right. We've long supported this thing called the piano roll, the piano roll editor, which for people who are accustomed to MIDI sequencers will recognize this sort of thing as an interface that can be used for editing notes. And it's not a familiar interface to me personally, because I'm not really a MIDI person. I mean, I've used MIDI sequencers on and off. The very first notation program I ever used was one called Notator for the Atari ST, which was really a sequencer that had notation features added to it in a very clever and very well done way that I think no one has really equaled since. MuseScore itself started off as a notation add-on to the sequencer Muse, but Werner, who developed them both, eventually realized no, this wasn't working to keep them connected. It was MuseScore would be better separated the score part from the sequencing part. But we have this piano roll editor that lets you do certain things like edit the length of that note and edit the length that value. So if I want to change this, whoa, that's apparently changing pitch. So I don't note multiply. Wow, look at all these settings. So I don't actually know how all of these settings work. All I can tell you is that there's new ones that were just merged, I think yesterday, that there's improvements in here. And I think one of them maybe is that you can make changes to multiple notes at once. Well, I can definitely make changes to multiple notes at once. That's not the specific change I envisioned, but I think maybe I'm changing their volume right now. Yeah, I don't know my way around this, but I will say that if you use the piano roll editor, have a ball. Play around with this, and maybe you'll see some new things coming. And between now and when it's released, we'll write up documentation for what's been changed. But yeah, some of these changes were just merged yesterday. All right. Then I think the last of the sort of big-ish features that I want to talk about has to do with measure numbering. So normally we have measure numbers that display at the start of the system above the staff, and that's kind of the standard in a lot of published music. And we've had settings that you could use to customize that. You'd go to Format, Style, Measure Numbers, and there were these settings here to control whether, first of all, whether they display at all. I can turn them off completely, and now they're gone. Or I can turn them on. Right now it's every system, but I can say I want it at an interval, every 5 measures, say, and now you can see it's there at measure 15 and here at measure 20. Or you can set the interval to 1, and now you get them on every single measure. Well, that's a common thing to put on every measure, but at least in some contexts where people do that, they don't put them over the bar line like that. They put it centered under the measure. Well, that's a thing now. So I can now come over here and say I want it below. And now you see that they're below. And I can set the horizontal placement to centered. And now you see that they are centered below the measures. I don't know that there is a way to get them below Oh, that was because I told it to be top staff only, right in here. Um, Oops, wrong dialogue. If I go back to format, style, all staves. All right, I'm going to set it to all staves, and now it's below all the staves. I don't think there's a way to get it just below the bottom staff, which probably some people who use this style might want. Um, that strikes me as a thing. And I remember this coming up in the discussion of the implementation of this, but I don't think it got implemented. But that's okay, because what we can now do is we can certainly select all similar elements on same staff, and now I've selected all those and just make them invisible. And then I can do the same here. That's probably not the most convenient way to do it. Actually, I can tell you a better way. Ooh, look at that. That wasn't undoable. But if I go and just select everything from here to the end of the score, and then down through those staves, and now I right click and now say all similar in range selection. Now I've got all of those well, no, I don't. That didn't work. All right, so the measure number selection thing doesn't quite work. Select all similar elements in range selection. Yeah, unfortunately that didn't do what I would need it to do. So measure numbers are still, because measure numbers are generated on the fly, they're not regular elements that you can do normal things with, and so it's unfortunately the case that some things that you would like to work with measure numbers just won't. And I guess this select all similar elements in range selection is just one of them. It just doesn't work. But the doing it a staff at a time did, and there might be more stuff coming. Managing what instruments are in the parts. Oh, okay. So yeah, I don't think there's any changes to that in this release. I know that's being worked on for whatever the next release will be. More, basically more significant changes to how more significant changes to how everything having to do with instruments and parts work. But what is the case, if I go to edit parts, and let me just generate a single part now, and I'm going to have this be for all three flutes, and I'm going to select all three flutes. Normally, I don't do this single part business. I just hit all parts, and it generates a separate part for each thing. But here, we're specifically doing interesting things. So now I have a part for all three flutes. And now let's say I want to change to just having, I say, I really don't want the first flute in that part. I want the first flute separate. So you would like to be able to come here to this and then edit that, right? I'd love to be able to come back here and then remove the flute one part from that, but that is just not a thing. So unfortunately, the only way to do that now is to delete that part and then add it again. But I do think very likely that will be coming in whatever sort of the next, this is considered a minor release, 3.5. It's the 3.5. Whether there's a 3.6 that comes next or whether there's a MuseScore 4, whatever, I don't know. But this is, for a minor release, I will say this is relatively major, just the sheer number of these little features, new features that are added. But bigger changes to how all of this works for, controlling instruments and parts. Bigger changes are very likely coming in probably the next update that's anywhere near as big as 3.5. So anyhow, delete that part, create a new one, and that's still the only option. But the other thing I wanted to talk about with the measure numbering is if I go and look at the parts, MultiMeasure Rests are here, and if I come in here and I turn on more stuff, every system, if I turn on the interval, because that was only the score options I was playing with, not the part options. So now I'm setting the part options. I got this happening. It's a possibility that we'll get a feature where it puts a measure number range for this. That didn't get merged yet. It might be merged before before the alpha gets released, or it might get merged before 3.5, but I have a feeling that's coming. But another one that got merged, I think this morning, is a style setting having to do with the MultiMeasure Rest display itself. So let's see. To be honest, I'm not sure where that is. Sometimes it works to right-click something and say Style. Where did it go? It went to Measure. But I don't... MultiMeasure Rest Margin. Howard, if you're around and you know, because I think that got merged this morning, but there were going to be settings to number position. Well, here it is here, so I can boom, 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 boom. I can make that number be higher. I can make that number be lower, right? And then I can hit set as style. And now if I have other multi-measure rests, like if I insert some other measures here, they're also there on the staff. So that set as style button is a way of setting the style. It could well be that somewhere buried in here is that, but apparently it wasn't under measure, at least not in a place that I could see, because now I don't see any of those. And is there a multi-measure rest section in here? I don't know where else that option would be. But speaking of such options, check this out. Those of you who have used MuseScore for any length of time may be aware that, for instance, the page numbers are in footers, and the only way to get at those before was to go to View, no, not View, Format, Style, Header, Footer, and then you could edit that footer. And it was not at all obvious. Well, now, boom, double click, takes you right there. That also was just merged in the last couple of days, and I was really happy about that. I think it was also, we added something so that you could right-click it. Right-click it and style? Maybe not. But a lot of things, if you right-click, a style option will show up. I think headers and footers don't have that. But like, instrument names are going to be similar. Did I mention that? So if I write, I'm a little surprised I'm not seeing style. Don't see style in the right-click menu for those, but again, for generated elements, it's different. For a lot of other things, when I right-click them and I press style, then it takes me right to that section of the style dialog. That's been a feature for a while. For 3.5, we've just expanded it some more. Anyhow, instrument names, double-click, pops you right into the staff properties dialog, which I don't know why we didn't do that, when years ago, but in any case, it's there now. So that's another one of the small little improvements in here. Howard, I showed your backup file thing. With that double click there, notehead scheme. If you use Jack audio, I mentioned sequencers before. If you have a sequencer or digital audio workstation software you use and you want to use MuseScore in conjunction with it, we've always supported a program called Jack that helps connect different programs, so you could connect your DAW software, your digital audio workstation, with MuseScore. But for the last year, Jack hasn't been well behaved with MuseScore 3 because of some limitations in how we did things, or bugs, basically. And I think as of MuseScore 3.5, it's now working on Windows and on Linux and on Mac OS. If it's working, I don't know if Jack even is a thing on Mac OS, but it should be working on Windows and Linux on systems where it wasn't working before. Yeah, that is the list that I had put together of the things that I thought were significant, worthy of mention. So yeah, those are some of the new things, and there's a lot of other smaller little new features. Like one of the things I'd love to be able to show you, except I think if I'm doing this right now, I think my shortcuts are different. But while I'm in the palettes, yeah, F6 is that shortcut. I'm gonna have to reset my shortcuts. But we've implemented some better keyboard navigation of the palettes, which is a really important accessibility thing. But also, I think some of it is just going to be useful in general. Like typing orna, just by typing the name of a palette in here, the search now matches the whole palette. I think that did not happen here. If I type, oh, it did. Okay, well, anyhow, there were some other changes relating to how this navigation and search works for the palettes. That's better. Among other things, it will no longer crash if you have a screen reader going, and so that's an important accessibility consideration, is not crashing. All right, so once again, I said, so MuseScore 3.5, as far as I know, let's take a quick look at chat. I don't see any, I didn't build alpha. We'll build it tomorrow. All right, cool. There we go. So the alpha will be tomorrow. But tomorrow for Anatoly. Anatoly's in Russia. So tomorrow for him means middle of the night for me. So could be well, for a lot of you who are in Europe, I know that's also middle of the night. Howard's getting even earlier for you, but in China. But at some point really soon, the package will be there, but whatever, the nightly build is still there to play with now, or you can just wait another day or two for the alpha package to be available to install. So that kind of wraps up the things that I wanted to talk about with related to MuseScore 3.5. I did just want to quickly return to our friend the Corona Canon, and mention that you had until I stopped talking to get scores in. I don't know if anyone actually managed to pop in a new one. Let's see if this 23 goes up to anything else. 24. Nope, it's still 23. All right, so what I'm going to do is I am just going to say we are done. 23 is more than enough submissions to keep me busy for a long time. So I can come here and say we're done adding scores. There we go. I am now going to take what's there and start assembling it, and that's going to be a project that I do over the coming week. And then I'll probably next week's Café we'll show the final product and talk more about it and whatever else might come up as a result of that. One last thing that I want to talk about today is just another, one of my own little commercial announcements that I need to do every once in a while. So I talk about music theory some, and, last week I did in the course of talking about that canon. One of the things that I've created that I talked about a couple of times before is this music master class. And when I talk about my basic theory class, which is really just about the basics of music, like notation and major and minor scales, triads, basic chords. And a lot of people were asking, well, what about more advanced theory? And yeah, I definitely want to be getting to that. And I didn't have a whole course developed, and that's going to take a while to develop a whole course for that. But what I can and am doing, and I've talked about this some, is this music masterclass. I launched it back in December just to have something to put more advanced material in. And I've been putting stuff there, but they're pre-recorded videos. Well, now that the world is starting to discover Zoom, and I've been teaching using Zoom and doing interactive teaching there, and of course I've been doing this Café for a while, which is interactive just by nature of the chat, I've decided to make the Music Masterclass have this interactive component. So tomorrow at the same time, it's 10:30 my time, whatever time this started for you, I'm going to do a live session here. Now, normally, this is like a thing I do as part of a site subscription because, well, this is how I make a living, is by doing that stuff. But, that's not to say that I'm only in it for the money or anything. What I want to do is I'm going to come here and I'm going to grab the link and I'm going to put it in the, how do I get there? I'm going to grab the link to the Zoom meeting and put it in here. So if anyone wants to check in on the masterclass tomorrow, I welcome you. And then you can see what it's about. So I'm going to grab that. It's, boy, Yeah, when I'm broadcasting, things are so slow on this computer. It's so funny. Um, but music masterclass. And I'll tell you what I'm going to talk about. What I'm going to talk about is the subject of harmonic rhythm is the overall topic, and voice leading and how these things relate to each other. Um, and so what I mean by harmonic rhythm is the idea of, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze in a second here. All right. Harmonic rhythm is the idea of hmm, how fast chords change. That's the idea. So there's a lot that we can talk about when it comes to harmony and how chords work in general. There's my dashboard. Um, all right, I think that's good. Okay. Um, so yeah, if you join us, you'll hear me talk about like issues having to do with how fast chords change in a piece. And like for instance, in that Beethoven piece, we have this idea of the chords changing in some places just two per measure. The chord changes in the middle of this measure, and then at one point here it changes with every note, but it doesn't change with every note through all these eighth notes here, and it doesn't change with all those eighth notes and all. So this is one form of harmonic rhythm that's sort of maybe an average. But in some contexts, we are going to expect to see the chords change more often. Like on every eighth note, we might expect to see the chords change. And in some cases, we might expect to see chords changing less often, not a chord change on every beat. And it has a lot to do with the type of instruments you're writing for, and a lot of a lot of consideration, the style of the piece. So there's a lot of considerations that go into how you harmonize a piece, even before you start to look at the details of, how what harmonic techniques you're using, the details of whether you're using secondary dominants, etc. So that is kind of going to be the topic that I'm going to be talking about, and I'm going to be using examples, and because it'll be by Zoom, I'll probably have people muted, so you'll just be chatting, but then we'll get to talk. We'll see how many people are tuned in live. So anyhow, that's coming tomorrow, and yeah, check it out. I welcome you all there. You don't have to register or subscribe or anything. Just follow that link. So that's been MuseScore 3.5. That was a little bit about the Corona Canon, and that was a little bit about my master class. I feel like I've been talking more than as much as I need to be talking. So if there's no further questions, I think I'll sign off now and start preparing some more stuff for that masterclass and some other things that I'm doing. And again, next week's topic will almost certainly be looking at the finished Corona Canon and talking about whatever comes up from that. So I hope everyone is continuing to stay safe and healthy, and you have a good week. And I will see you next time.